Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of Trailhead DX. You guys all enjoy yesterday? Learn a whole bunch? Cool. My name is Scott Kozinchik. I'm a product manager on the process automation team at Salesforce. So I own the products Visual Workflow and Lightning Process Builder. How many of you guys are familiar with Visual Workflow and Process Builder? Yeah, figured. Cool. And how many of you are familiar with the new external services beta feature? OK, cool. Not as many. Great. So we're going to cover that today, and we're going to show how the two work together. So before we begin, we've got to do this thing, forward-looking statements. I'm going to talk about future stuff. Make sure you make all of your product buying decisions based on today's technology and what's available. I'm just actually curious. Have any of you actually read that start to finish? I saw someone shake their head. That's awesome. She may be the one. Cool. So what we're going to cover today, we'll first do a quick overview of Visual Workflow. It sounds like most of you know what it is. I'm going to keep that brief. Then I'm going to introduce the external services feature, which is in beta currently in the summer release. You can actually use it already. I'll walk through how to set up an external service that you can use in Flow. And then I'm going to do a live demo. We're actually going to use it. And we're going to do it in a production org, in a production developer org. So you could actually go home and do everything that you're about to see. And then we'll do a little bit of a roadmap session for external services, because it is going to be changing in the coming releases. And then I'll point you to some great content on Trailhead. It wouldn't be Trailhead DX if I didn't pitch Trailhead. So a quick overview of Flow. By the way, which, as you probably all know, is officially called Visual Workflow. But in most of our blogs and community content and a lot of our documentation, we'll just refer to it as Flow, as will I for the rest of the presentation. I apologize. I'm going to be coughing a little bit. So you guys have all heard the clicks not code thing, the declarative, being able to drag and drop and not have to write code to accomplish things in Salesforce. Code's super powerful. It's not for everybody. Salesforce has a great platform for writing code and getting a lot done. But we also have an amazing platform if you're not a programmer. And so Visual Workflow, or Flow, is right in the middle of that. You're able to do quite a few things with Visual Workflow that you might otherwise want to do in Apex. You can create simple or complex business process logic, and you can enforce things in your org, or you can do things automatically to relieve your staff from having to do repetitive menial tasks. It has all the CRUD operations that you would need, so you can work with your Salesforce data right within the flow. You have the option of using user interface or keeping everything invisible behind the scenes and it just acting as your business logic, like programmatic logic. So you can use screens and you can dialogue agents or salespeople or users for information or display information to them, or you can just have Flow running business logic, changing data. You have a lot of control over what you do because we give you a lot of the same constructs you would have in a programming language, such as variables, looping. It's called a decision node, but it ultimately is a switch statement because you can have multiple outcomes in the decision. And then the beauty of the Salesforce platform is that you can blend declarative or clicks with code, Apex. So if you reach the limits of what you want to accomplish using something like Visual Workflow, you can just write Apex classes that are constructed in a particular fashion called invocable actions, and then you can call them directly from Flow. And external services does that for you, which is what I'm going to demonstrate. So this is our no-code API consumption, almost no code. I'm going to explain that in a second. How many of you are familiar with the external objects feature in Salesforce? Awesome. So external objects let you map out to data as though it were in Salesforce. External services let you map out to services as though they were in Salesforce. But there's a little bit of code. So this is probably something you're all familiar with and you all contend with, which is why you're here. You have a lot of your business logic inside Salesforce, and you're running a lot of what you do inside Salesforce, and your users might even be using Salesforce interfaces exclusively or largely. But you probably have intellectual property in a proprietary system that your company owns and codes. And you probably take advantage of third-party services financial institutions, for example, take advantage of FICO and other credit rating agencies as a third-party service. And you typically interface with those external systems via an API. There's usually a REST API or a SOAP API available. And in Salesforce, the traditional method has always been write Apex classes. Write your own code and reach out to them. It's not very hard, but you just have to have that skill set. And not all Salesforce administrators have that skill set. And not all companies are large enough to have developers on staff. So external services changes the paradigm. We swap out that Apex part. We don't actually swap it out. There's still Apex under the hood. We just don't ask you to write it. We write it for you effectively. The key to it, though, is having a schema file that describes the API so that the external services feature can actually create all of the Apex code needed to reach out to those endpoints. So this is the new no-code version. But as I mentioned, it's not exactly no-code because you do need the description file, the schema file, and the schema file is code. So it is JSON formatted. It's in, right now, currently in the beta, it supports a format that's familiar to Heroku called the inner agent format. Inner agent's not super widely adopted, but there's a hyperlink here that has more information about the inner agent schema, so you can learn more about that. And I'm going to talk in the roadmap about supporting different schema file version formats in the future. But for now, the way this works, to set up an external service, if you're a Clicks admin, not a code admin, and you don't want to write Apex, you do need to involve a developer, probably. Unless you're able to find one of these schema files in a community online, you just reach out to your developer, who are one of your developers on your dev team who built your company's API. And the developer's role is code. So he or she creates and shares the schema file with you. They also provide the API endpoint so that you know what to point to. And they give you some form of authentication. You guys just agree on what the authentication is and you get all the necessary credentials. Then you, as the administrator, the wise owl, I don't even know what that character's name is. I think it might be Hootie. But so, administrator, you do clicks, right? So you basically just create a reference to the API endpoint, and that's really easy. It's cut and paste. You upload the schema file, or you just point to it, and external services will go out and get it and download it. And then you're done. You just use those endpoints in Visual Workflow. It's that easy. So more specifically, in Salesforce, you as the administrator create something called a named credential. And we're going to do this together. It takes seconds. And then you leave from there, once that's created, and you go to the external service. I'll show you where it is in the menu tree. It's actually called integrations. But you're setting up external service integrations. You point to the schema file, you reference the named credential, and you click done. And that's it. Then the feature, external services, takes the schema file, it auto-generates the Apex classes, the actions necessary for you to use, and then makes those classes available to you in Visual Workflow. And from that point, it's just drag and drop. You just drag it onto the Visual Workflow canvas. You map the in variables and the out variables, assuming there are both in most actions, and you proceed. Again, we're going to do this. I'm going to show you guys all this stuff. I'm just going through the high-level overview, so you kind of have a mental map of what we're going to be seeing. And then you have Visual Workflow access to your external systems. It's super powerful. It does involve a developer because you need that schema file. But presuming you can get one, the rest is super easy. So let's see this in action. So let's pretend we're the administrator, and we need to gather our starting materials. So we need an API endpoint. We need a link to the schema file. And in this particular scenario, the developer was smart and put the schema file at the API endpoint under the relative path schema. Makes it super easy for us. And then gave us an ID and a password. You're probably going to use OAuth or some other authentication, but for demo purposes and speed, we're just going to use an ID and a password. So let's do this. So you guys can all see my screen? Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So here we are inside of a Salesforce developer org in production. I just set this up yesterday. at salesforce.com, like everyone does. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to setup. Oh, wait, I have setup open over here. We're going to look for named credentials. Cool. So I already have one set up, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new one so you can see it. And so we're going to go back to the PowerPoint so that we can get the endpoint. And we'll call this credit service 2, since I forgot to delete the other one when I was demoing this. And I just cut and paste the URL for the endpoint straight in there. I'm going to ignore the certificate for now. The identity type is going to be a named principal. You could do this per the user interacting with Salesforce. And I'm going to make this password authentication. And this was SF, happen to remember this, SFDC admin. And a secret password that no one knows. And then we'll click Save. And so now we have this named credential, Credit Service 2. We already had Credit Service. We could use either one, really. But now back over here in the setup tree, down underneath Platform Tools, at the very bottom is this thing called Integrations Beta. And Integrations Beta is the external services. And so here we're going to, looks like this is, I thought I deleted all these last night. Apologies. So, but we're going to go through it we're going to do it again. And so when you go to it, it's got some great information on how this all works. It's got a video, or sorry, it's got a PowerPoint presentation that explains things, and it's got links to documentation. There's pretty good documentation. There's no Trailhead yet, but that's coming. And so then we'll click Next, and then we'll name our service, Credit Service 2, just to be consistent. And then we'll enter a description. We'll skip that. But then this is already there, so it's /schema, right? This is where our schema file is. And if just to show you a quick demo, if we were to go to the schema to the service and type in schema, here is our inner agent description file, all ready to go. And that's pretty hard to read. I'm sure you're all familiar with JSON. So here it is in Postman. It's a little prettier. So you can see that it's got all this information, and the working end of it is links. So we have a credit rating method and an evaluate endpoints. And credit rating retrieves the credit rating associated with an order, and evaluate evaluates credit rating and decides what payment terms to offer. So we're just handing that to Salesforce by entering this. I could copy and paste into this box here instead, and then it would just grab it from there. And the nice thing about that is, let's say your developer were to give you the JSON file, the schema file for the entire API. It has every endpoint in there, but you only care about like 50% of them. You could go in and cut them out and just register the ones that you want to use inside Salesforce. So we'll click Save, and then we're going to point to an existing named credential. So we'll use Credit Service 2. Click Save, and it's successful. So, and you can see here, so view Apex actions, view the generated actions available for use in Flow. So we have credit rating, and it takes input parameters of account ID and outputs a credit rating, and evaluate, it takes the inputs of order amount and credit rating and outputs payment terms. So that's just ready to go. We'll click Next. And again, this is another page that has more information about how to now use those Apex actions inside Flow. But I'm going to go ahead and show it to you guys. But you can come here later and watch the video or follow the links if you want to learn more. So we'll click Done. And so now we have these two credit services. I'm wondering if I can delete this to, or if referential integrity. No, it did it. Cool. So now that we have this, let's go to Flow. Let's take a look. So if we go to Flow, I have a couple of them pre-set up so that saves some time in the demo space. So I have a flow called Get Credit Rating. And if I open this, you'll see that I've set it up so that I'm in I'm assuming if we look at the Explorer, I've got an input variable of account ID. You can see that it's input only. And then I've got a string for credit rating. This is what I'm expecting to use. And then I've got a screen to trigger it. And then, so I'm expecting the account ID to be passed into the flow, and then I'm going to do a record lookup on that with that account ID to find an account that I'm going to put in a local S object variable. And then and then the screen, I'm going to trigger it, and then I'm going to put something here. We'll show you that in a second. Then when I get the credit rating, I'm going to update the record to save the credit rating, and then I'm going to show what it was and that it's done. And if you look over here in the palette, when I go back to palette, you'll see under Apex, I've got these two callouts. So let's start with credit rating. I'm just going to drag this over to here, and we're going to call this get credit rating. And this is synchronous. In the beta, we don't have asynchronous yet. I'll talk about that in the roadmap session. So this is going to be a synchronous call, so make sure your service responds quickly. And so we have inputs and outputs. So the input is simply account ID, and we're just going to use the account ID that was passed in. And then we go to outputs, and it's credit rating, and we're just going to assign that to the variable I already created called string credit rating. And then we're going to plumb this together. We're going to plumb this together. And so now in the record update, on the account ID that matches the inbound account ID, I can set the custom credit rating field on the account object to what was in the string. Really fast, just going to look at the record lookup to make sure I have this right so we don't gack. Lookup, account ID. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to grab the name field and put it in the sets object. All right, so let's save this. And then close it. And then let's activate it so we can use it places. And then what I've done, I don't know, some of you may or may not be familiar with Lightning Application Builder, Lightning App Builder. Let's see if I can open this in a new tab. Lightning App Builder is a great way to work with Lightning pages and customize them. And there's a few different kinds of Lightning pages you can customize. You can customize a home page, so you can have different home pages for your different users. Record detail page, so you can replace the record detail home for any given record. And then custom app pages that you can really customize to do anything. So what I've created here is a new account detail page to replace the standard account detail page. So we're going to edit this. And so across the top, I have the highlights panel. Over here, I've got the activity and chatter feeds. And in the center here, I've got this tab section. And you can see that tabs is a Lightning control. And so what I want to do is I have these three tabs. What I want to do is create a new one. So I'm going to click on the tab section, and over here I see them listed. I'm going to add a tab. I'm going to give this a custom name of get credit rating. And I'm going to move this up into the third position because it's a little more contextual to our flow. In the get credit rating tab, there's no content. But I'm going to go over here to the flow component. I'm going to drag the flow component in and drop it right in that spot. And over here, I can choose any active flow. So I'm going to choose get credit rating. And then I'm going to leave it as a one-column layout because there's not much to it UI-wise. And then we have, and it sees that that flow has an input variable, and it offers to pass the record ID into it. So I'm going to check that box, and the record ID is, automatically mapped to be passed into the flow. So we'll click Save. And now we're going to go back to basically Salesforce user home, right? So now I'm a sales agent, let's say, and I go to Accounts. And I've been looking at Burlington Textiles Corp of America a whole bunch. And if we look at this record, we can see kind of some of the basic stuff. We've got a chatter posting thing up here. But here we have a related list. We have details, and you'll see that there is no credit rating. I mapped this in page layouts so that I would put the credit rating right here. But if I go to the Get Credit Rating tab, it says Get Credit Rating. Click Next to get one. Fingers crossed, it worked last night, but this is a demo, so there's a good chance it won't. Look at that. Apparently Burlington, I'm really hoping right now that this is a fictitious company because they got a poor rating. So click Finish. We could do it again. But if I go back to details, you'll see that I grabbed the credit rating from the Apex service that I created by uploading a file. How cool is this so far? I have a credit rating of poor automatically inserted into the record. And all I've done is clicks, no code. I'm pretty excited at this point. So to carry this demo further, let's take a look at this product order. So we have a product order here. And you'll see, actually, in the related lists that we have product orders. And in the past, we've created this new widgets product order where I ordered a large widget for pretty darn close to $50,000. But we have this payment terms field that I also want to fill in when I create a new order. But the payment terms come from that external service. So let's see how we would go about doing this. So so on the page, on the account page, this is like what I showed you before. This is a tab with a flow. So this is for the account Burlington Textiles Corp of America, which in the flow, I loaded this I looked up the record based on the inbound account ID. I give it an order name, an arbitrary order name. I choose from my list of widgets and cogs, and then I enter a dollar amount. But I want to go get those product terms automatically. So let's take a look at the flow that we're interacting with right here. So let's leave Lightning App Builder, because we already have this one set up. We don't need to go back to that. So we're going to go back to Flow under Process Automation. We go to Flows, and here's this flow that we've been interacting with. And this one's active right now because we were using it. So what we're going to have to do is save it as a new version and then activate the new version. So here we have, again, we have an inbound account ID that I'm going to use. I'm doing a little bit of error trapping logic here, where I check to see if I have it, and if I don't, instead of passing a null field to a lookup, which will give me an error, I say if I don't have it, then I ask for it in a screen, and then I assign it to the same local variable I use in the lookup. But we're going to get it. I look up the account information. I show the inputs to get the information I want, and then currently I'm just doing this record create, where I assign the account ID. I create a new product order, and I'm assigning the account ID, the name, and the amount and the product. But what I'm going to do is go back over to this second call out that I got from our external services. Oops, I'm in the wrong. Need to be over here. I'm going to go to my second call out, and I'm going to get evaluate. And I'm going to drag it over here. I'm going to reposition it in a second. And this is going to be get payment terms. And again, inputs and outputs. So my input credit rating is going to be the S-object variable account credit rating, which I got in the lookup. And then I'm going to add, there was another one, so there's the order amount. And this one I'm just going to pass in from the input field on the screen. The person just entered that. Then the outputs, I'm going to choose the payment term is being passed to me from the action, and I'm going to stuff that in a variable I already created, a string for payment terms. So now I've got this Apex callout, again, that I did not have to code. I'm going to delete this connector, and I'm going to insert this one in the middle here. And then I'm going to make one more change to the record create, because now that I have the payment terms, I want to include that when I create the product order record. So I'm going to add a row, and I'm going to choose payment terms. So it does the contextual quick search. And then I'm going to go over here, and I now have this string variable I got back from the Apex callout, and I'm going to assign that. So I click OK. Then I'm going to save this as, I could try to click save, but I get an error saying it can't be saved over. So a new version, click OK. And then when I close this, I'm going to see a list of my versions here. So the current one we don't need to deactivate it. By clicking activate, it'll do the override. So now I've activated the new one. So now if I go back to my Burlington Textiles Corp of America page and hit refresh, just want to make sure that we've got all the current versions of everything. So you'll notice I still have the one product order, but if I go to create a new one, and I enter the order name of new cog order, and we're going to get some blue cogs, and we're only going to spend $10,000 this time. And I'm going to hit next. And it's going to tell me that this order was successfully created, and it gives me the ID back. So I'm going to say finish, and it resets me. I could make another order if I wanted to. Let's go take a look at that related list. So here we have the new cog order was just created, and if I click on it, you'll notice that it has all the information I entered, and I was given a 15-day payment term from the Apex service that I connected to outside of Salesforce. I'm going to stress this one again without having written any code. So, so that's the demo part. I'm kind of a nerd, so when I first saw this, I was pretty excited. Anyone else feeling the excitement of no-code Apex? Yeah, let's hear it. 9 a.m. in the morning. I've had my coffee. I don't know. You may not have. But I was pretty excited. So let's recap. Let's recap what we've just seen, right? So our developer did have to write some code, but presumably use some kind of a tool set that spit this schema file out automatically, because developers are pretty smart and they don't like to do too many things they don't have to. So they give us the schema file. They pass it through to the wise admin. The wise admin just sticks it in the external services with the name Credential, which automatically creates the methods needed for visual workflow, which then gives you this visual workflow API lovefest. And it's just that awesome. Ooh, I'm not in present mode. So yeah, pretty awesome stuff. So external services we're not done. This is just a beta. And so also I'm not the PM, but I work very closely with her. And if you guys want to learn more about this, I can get you connected. But in the, what is it? It's going to be the winter version that's being worked on right now, and that we're coming towards the end of the development cycle on. They're going to support another file format for that schema file, and it's Open API, also called Swagger. And the really nice thing about this is more adopted by the community, and there is an large set of existing, well, I don't know about large, there's a set of existing tools to help you make these files. We're going to be working on performing these actions asynchronously. There's some work being done in Flow as well as being done on the external services roadmap, which will allow you to send out messages and then put the flow in a waiting state, or even just progress on other things inside Flow. And then messages can be sent back into Salesforce through something called the platform events queue. And then Flow will be subscribed to those particular events of a particular shape, and then you can do things in Flow. Distribution via managed packages. You may have set these things up and you want to share them with others. Dynamic Apex actions in other Apex classes. So since we have these, we want to use this elsewhere. And then even though it was pretty easy, I did the easiest possible version of authentication with ID and password. So when it gets more complex on the authentication side, having a wizard for named credentials is going to be helpful. So there's some related Trailhead content. There's a whole trail for automating your business processes. And this basically includes the process automation module, which covers process builder and visual workflow and approvals and the old workflow rules. And it has great content on how to migrate old workflow rules into process builder processes, which is a good practice to start thinking about and planning for. But the trail, in addition, has some really cool projects and challenges that'll help expand your thinking and push you further down the road of using the tool set to really make your business run efficiently. We're at the Q&A section, and I'm going to open it up. I'm going to make one quick comment because some of you might ask, Process Builder, I didn't talk about Process Builder for a particular reason. So Process Builder, if you make these Apex actions in this beta, you will see the Apex classes in Process Builder. But if you try and use them directly, you'll get an error. And the reason for that is because Process Builder is bound to a trigger, and there's protective code inside the platform that prevents you from making an external callout in the middle of a core Salesforce transaction, so that a lack of response or an errant response can't corrupt the Salesforce transaction. So it's just one of those beta glitches that you can see it inside Process Builder. There's a way to work around that. If you write an Apex class that wraps the automatically generated callout that external services make, and you wrap it in an async, you make it type async, then you can use that class in Process Builder, and it will be outside the transaction, and all is good. But that does require a few lines of code. All right, that caveat out of the way, I'm open to questions. Are there any? Yeah? Yeah, so about the schema? Yeah, sure. So the Heroku app that he was asking me to speak a little bit more about it. It's just a simple service. It was made for demo purposes. I was told by the PM it randomly generates the credit rating. It could be really complex code that reaches out into other systems or even reaches back into Salesforce via the API and makes complex decisions. But we just really wanted to show reaching out to a service with an endpoint and getting a response back synchronously. I can ask. Yeah, for sure. And then the schema generation, I'm assuming one of the developers on the external services team threw the schema together. I wasn't part of that, but it's not a super complex schema. I've seen ones that have many more. I mean, you guys have all seen APIs, many, many more endpoints. In the back. Sorry, do you mind coming up so I can hear you? With what? I'm sorry, I still can't. Oh, field service, fields. Forms? Oh, flows, field service flows. That's a good question. I haven't actually asked the PM that. So I don't know. Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure. Oh, sorry.
How does the error handling work when you're in a REST call? Let's say you get a 500 or anything like that. Do you handle that within the builder? Say if REST call outs 500, then you guess it's.
Yeah, you can build. I did the simplest, most linear flow, but you can actually test the response for different. Yeah, yeah. So you can build a decision node that then goes through all the various different cases of the different outputs. Okay, great. Got it. I suspect because what it's really doing is proxying the creation of Apex callouts, whatever the Apex limits are. Yeah.
I mentioned this yesterday in another class. If you're working on a name credential expansion, it would be really nice if it had a child lines for the headers, because if you've got 3 or 4 headers that you have to enter every time, that becomes tedious.
Yeah.
Time the name credential, I think that'd be a really good idea.
I'm not that familiar with name credentials. I saw something in there about headers, but if it's, you would probably know better if you just took a class on it.
No, it's not.
Okay.
We can't, as developers, create child items to it either. So
Got it.
I just thought
ID exchange.
you had it. Yeah.
Community.
The ideas, a lot of these ideas.
Cool. There was another hand.
Same process to work being initialized from an external application.
The same.
As the call in with Salesforce.
Uh-huh.
Still use this flow and this concept. Let's say if you have SAP or something like that, need to get data from Salesforce, same type of setup work.
Not really, because it's actually creating callouts that you can use from within Salesforce. Salesforce has an entire API structure you can use to call in from SAP. You just wouldn't necessarily use this service.
Who should we contact to get into the pilot program?
Well, there's no pilot program. It's a beta. You can just use it. It's available to everybody. But because it's a beta,
Is there documentation on what that schema file needs to be?
yeah. Yeah, there is. There's a whole section on the schema file and links to the actual schema definition. It's all on GitHub. Yeah. Well, sorry, you can get the links to it from the Salesforce documentation, but it's hosted on GitHub in the community. Yeah. Does it support? That is a good question. It's just, I honestly don't know. When I'm just reading through the schema files, I think everything I've seen is REST. Oh, here we go, Belinda. So this is the PM who I was referring to earlier. So if you have any actual really deep questions on this, please come up and see Belinda at the end. So it is only REST.
Yeah, the current external services is meant to connect with REST APIs.
So what she's saying is the current external services feature is meant to connect with REST APIs. Is that on the roadmap in the future to support SOAP?
We've looked at other things, but it's not on the near term.
It's not on the near-term roadmap to support other things other than REST. Yeah. No, we tried that, but apparently the call-out protection context inherits from Process Builder because Process Builder is bound to the trigger. Question is scheduled actions. We tried that too. So what'll happen is whatever is in the scheduled action that updates the Salesforce data works, but the callout still fails as a result of this. So you really just do need to wrap the callout that was generated in your own Apex code that makes it an asynchronous, and then you're good to go. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh yeah, over here. Sorry?
If you wrap it and execute it asynchronously, can you still retrieve that variable in the flow, or do you have to rely on the code to come back on the direct?
No, you would still be able to call that class from the code and it would pass through to the flow. Yeah, because the flow will just run outside the transaction, but it's still the flow running all the way through, running the class. Yeah. Great, everyone. Thank you very much. Again, if you have any questions, I'll be here for a few minutes, but Belinda is the master, knows all things about this. Thank you.